Make no mistake, Dallas's housing market is absolutely booming right now. We are talking nearly 20% year-over-year growth in home prices. That is absolutely crazy. Dallas has never experienced anything like that in its history. And with that crazy growth, many are now wondering if we could be in a housing bubble in Dallas. After all, the levels of appreciation and nominal home prices are at their highest level ever for a market that was historically stable and affordable. So what I'm going to do in this video is provide you guys, you potential home buyers and real estate investors in Dallas, with the data, the hard data from sources such as Zillow, the U.S. Census Bureau, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics, so you can better understand what is going on in Dallas's housing market and whether now is the right time to buy or whether you should wait for the crash and potentially 10, 20, or even 30% price declines to hit the market. Additionally, we're also going to take a look at which areas within Dallas across the metro might be the best for you to buy in, because after all, Dallas is a really, really big place and there's big differences across the market depending on where you go. So without further ado, let's get into the data, everyone. And the first place we need to get started is understanding how the character of Dallas's real estate market has changed considerably over the last 5 years and especially the last 12 months. On this graph, we're looking at two data points. The yellow line, which is home price growth across the Dallas metro over the last 25 years, compared to the blue line, which is the level of inflation growth over the last 25 years. Home price data comes from Zillow. Inflation data on the Dallas metro comes from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And we can see from about 1996 to about 2015 or so, home price growth and inflation growth in Dallas largely tracked each other. They were very similar. And Dallas historically was a very stable market. Prices went up by maybe 2-3% a year. Inflation was 2-3% a year. And you could make a bit of a return on housing in Dallas, but it really wouldn't exceed the broader costs of goods and services and wages in the economy. Of course, that has changed significantly over the last 5 years. As we can see, this yellow line, home price growth, has shot all the way up through July 2021 to plus 171% now compared to its level in 1996, while inflation, which is the CPI level excluding shelter in the Dallas metro, is only up 54%. And the real question at hand here is, why are home prices, after being so consistently linked to the level of inflation in Dallas for so long, why are home prices the last 5 years, and especially the last year, growing so much above that level of inflation? And is that growth justified, or is Dallas quite simply in a housing bubble? And understanding the level of inflation in a market is important because that indicates the broader cost of goods and services, as well as how much people are being paid in the economy for wages. And if home prices are going way above inflation, especially after being linked to inflation for so long, you got to start scratching your head, right? And asking yourself a question of like, why is this happening and is this justified? And we're going to get into this in detail later in the video. But what I want to actually start with is understanding Dallas from a more micro level. What are the different counties, cities, and neighborhoods within Dallas? Because there's big differences across the Dallas metro. I mean, it's one of the biggest areas in America. Nearly a population of 8 million people in the Dallas-Fort Worth-Arlington metro area. And there's just so many different cities and neighborhoods. So if you're a home buyer or a real estate investor coming into Dallas, not only do you need to ask yourself, should I buy now or wait? But you should also ask yourself, where do I want to live? Where do I want to buy in the Dallas metro? And what we're looking at on this map are the 11 counties which comprise the Dallas-Fort Worth-Arlington metro area. That's right, there's 11 counties which comprise this metro, and they have a population combined of 7.7 million people, which is the fourth largest in America. So we're dealing with one of the biggest, most sprawling metroplexes in America when we're looking at Dallas's overall real estate market. What you can see, though, is that despite Dallas metro having 11 counties, there's really 4 that stick out in particular as the ones with kind of the most population, the most business growth, and the largest real estate markets. The first one that pops out would be Dallas County here outlined, which is the principal county of the metro and kind of what most people think of when you think of Dallas. This is where downtown Dallas is, uptown, Highland Park, University Park, Irving, Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. This is kind of the first area that got founded in the Dallas metro, and it has the largest population, comprising 34% of the total metro population. Just to the west, we have Tarrant County with a population of 2.1 million. This is where Fort Worth and Arlington are. This is also a very dense area. lots of businesses here, lots of people living here, and both of these counties would be more applicable for you if you're looking for a place with amenities, access to nightlife, restaurants, more dense urban living or suburban living. Dallas and Tarrant County would fit the bill more there. If you guys are enjoying this data and love the local deep dives that I do, just make sure to hit this like button. When you do that, it gives me support on YouTube, gets this video out to a broader audience, and allows me to do more of these videos going forward. Also, make sure to leave a comment. Let me know what market you want me to do a deep dive on next. I basically base these videos on what popular demand is, so make sure to make your voice heard in the comments section. All right, everyone, let's get back to it. If we go up north to Collin County and Denton County, which both have a population of around 1 million, these are more suburban and rural counties. More suburban and rural. They don't have quite as much going on in terms of nightlife and amenities. However, they have a lot more growth. In fact, both Denton and Collin County are in the top 5 in America for job growth and migration and population growth over the last 5 years. So you're actually not really going to find areas in America that are growing faster than these two northern Dallas metro counties. Collin County is where cities like Frisco, Plano, McKinney, and Prosper are that are adding a lot of people, a lot of corporations every year, whereas Denton has the city of Denton as well as Louisville. Tons and tons of growth going on in both Collin and Denton counties. So it's important to understand what you're looking for out of a neighborhood and city as a home buyer or real estate investor. Like, on one hand, are you someone who wants to be in an area with access to amenities and nightlife and with a high population density, so we're not going to have too much new building occurring? If so, Dallas and Tarrant County would be the areas that you might prefer. On the other hand, if you're someone who wants somewhere with more space, more room to grow, better school districts, but on the negative side, lots of new home building, potentially Collin and Denton County should be a place that you should check out. So it's really just first important to do a checklist of what you are looking for out of a neighborhood or city. And so those are the qualitative aspects about potentially where you could buy in Dallas, what types of preferences you have about your home or investment property and where it's located. But I'm sure a lot of you want to know about the quantitative aspects, right? Like home prices and home price growth. If you buy in one county versus the other, can you expect more future appreciation or a bigger crash occurring in one place? Let's take a look into that. So what we're looking at on this graph are the year-over-year changes in home prices across these 4 principal counties in Dallas going back 25 years. And in orange, we have Dallas County. In teal, we have Tarrant. In red, we have Denton. In blue, we have Collin. And I think the first thing that sticks out here is that while there's some small differences over time about how much a certain county appreciates compared to others, we can see that in general, these 4 counties move in close lockstep to each other. Like when prices tend to go down in one, they go down in the others, and when they go up in one, they go up in the others. And this is a key realization that when you're buying into a housing market, your future appreciation is mostly dictated by what's going on at the metro level. What's going on is at the metro level in terms of job growth and wage growth and how many homes are being built and how many people are moving there. That's the biggest factor in your local home price growth. And I think a lot of people kind of struggle to wrap their heads around this, and they think that, oh, if I buy in a certain location in a city, that I'm going to completely insulate myself from a crash, or I'm going to get way better appreciation in one area than another. And in general, that isn't really the case. So I want you to think about where you buy in Dallas more related to your preferences about what you want, where you want to live or invest, rather than like you're going to achieve way greater or less growth in a certain area. Now, there are some interesting deviations, though, and I actually want to point you to the couple years that occurred prior to the COVID pandemic. We can actually see that Collin and Denton County here from about 2017 through late 2019, early 2020 had a big deceleration in home price growth. We can see Collin County actually in 2019 went into the negatives in home price growth all the way up through February 2020. Home price growth in Collin County was flat or negative. And again, those cities would be Frisco, Plano, McKinney, Prosper, and Collin County. They were experiencing zero growth in the year prior to COVID. Denton also had a big drop. Of course, since the pandemic, all areas in Dallas have skyrocketed, and now Collin County is up 20% year over year in home price growth, while Tarrant is up 17%, Denton's up 16%, and Dallas is up 14%. And this sudden surge in home prices across the Dallas metro area, particularly in Collin County, is really destabilizing the market. Like, you're seeing crazy stuff going on in some of these markets. Homes that were valued at $250,000 all of a sudden selling for $320,000. Market rent that used to be $1,700 all the way going up to $2,400 in a short span of time. All of this in a market that was historically stable. And let me actually show you what I'm talking about with a specific on-the-ground example that I filmed in Frisco, which is in Collin County.
So I'm walking around a neighborhood in northern Frisco right now. This is an area that's absolutely booming, as we discussed. Huge levels of job growth, huge levels of population growth, one of the highest growing areas in America. Now, you can see the homes behind me. They're kind of small, 1,800 square feet, 3 bedrooms. This represents a lot of the housing stock in this northern area of Frisco. Now, traditionally, this market was very stable. Even though there's a lot of population growth, home prices didn't really go up by much because, quite simply, so much new housing was getting built around here that appreciation was kind of hard to come by. But that has changed over the last year significantly. And you can actually see this property behind me. This property sold in early August for around $330,000, way above what it was valued just a year ago, $50,000 to $70,000 higher than it was valued just a year ago. It was bought by an investor. This investor listed it for rent immediately at $2,400 a month. That's $600 higher than what the Zillow rental estimate was just in May 2021. So in the span of 3 months, the Zillow rental estimate went from $1,800 to being listed at $2,400. And so what we're seeing now in Frisco, in these northern areas of Frisco especially, areas that were traditionally stable and affordable are becoming high appreciation, high rent growth, and expensive. And this is a new paradigm for Frisco. This is a new paradigm for Dallas in general. And I'm a little skeptical of this recent surge in appreciation and rent growth in a place like Frisco and Dallas more broadly, because there's a reason why this area, this city, this metro was affordable for so long. And that's because they built a lot of new housing down here in Dallas, and especially northern Dallas and Frisco. So many new homes and apartments always getting built, and that's continuing to be the case. They're just pumping out the new homes in Dallas. Single-family permitting has increased by 35% over the last year, the last 12 months. So they're pumping out new homes in the Dallas area. And when you build so many new homes, it makes it more difficult for appreciation and rent growth to occur because you keep the supply and demand balanced. So in a market where we're building tons of new homes and it's historically affordable, when we all of a sudden see a big sudden surge in appreciation and rent growth, it's gotta make you stop and question it a bit and say, what's going on here? This is a big deviation from the historical norm. Is this deviation actually justified by anything fundamentally? Or is it a sign of a housing bubble occurring in both Dallas and Frisco?
And I think the first thought here is that the crazy home price appreciation that we're seeing across Dallas is because so many people are moving to Dallas, especially over the last year and a half due to the pandemic. The narrative goes that we're just seeing large influxes of people moving to Sunbelt markets like Dallas, and as a result, that's why home prices are going up so much. The good thing is that we can actually test these claims about migration levels into Dallas because the U.S. Census Bureau tracks annual level of migrations. They use data on IRS tax filings as well as Medicare enrollment to estimate how many people are moving into a new metro area and county each year. So we can take a look at how many people have been moving to Dallas recently and compare it to what it was like over time to see just how big an increase there is and if that's the reason why home prices are going up in Dallas. And what we're looking at on this graph are these migration levels into Collin County specifically in Dallas over the last 2 decades. And again, Collin County is where the cities of Frisco and Plano and Prosper and McKinney are. Those are in Collin County. We're leveraging the levels of migration, net migration annually into this county, data that comes from the U.S. Census Bureau. And so migration here is the yellow line. We can see that in 2020, 31,000 people net moved into Collin County, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. And that's above where it was in 2019, 2018, but it's actually fairly in line with some historical averages. We can see back in 2006, we had plus 31,000 net migration into Collin County. We had plus 30,000 in 2001. So the migration levels are fairly consistent in this 20 to 30,000 range going back each year over the last 2 decades. And that's important to remember. Migration is not something that tends to just like surge off the charts all of a sudden or collapse. it stays in a pretty healthy band. So Collin County, it is one of the highest growth markets, highest growth counties in America, but that growth has been fairly steady, fairly consistent. Now we're comparing migration, the yellow line here, to the levels of permitting, which are the blue line, the permitting of new homes and apartments for construction. And it's really the relationship between this migration and this permitting, which dictates whether there's like a structural fundamental shortage of housing or if enough housing is being produced. And what I want you guys to pay attention to are these green bars. These green bars, because these actually measure the relationship of migration and permitting. So for instance, back in 2006 in Collin County, we had plus 31,000 migration, plus 14,000 permitting, and that was a ratio of 2.1 people moving in for every unit permitted. And that, 2-to-1 ratio, outside of a brief period from 2008 to 2011 when there was a shortfall in new permitting during the housing crash, that 2-to-1 ratio has just been very consistent over time in Collin County. And so what this suggests is that the notion of a crazy surge in migration into Dallas more broadly, Collin County specifically, we hear this a lot. People say there's just so many more people moving from California and New York to Dallas now. That doesn't really seem to be the case when we look at data from the U.S. Census Bureau. Now, the most recent data we have on this migration is through July 1st, 2020 from the U.S. Census. That only captures about 3 to 4 months of the COVID pandemic. However, looking at more real-time data sources such as U.S. Postal Service change of address data also shows that we're really not seeing much higher levels of migration into Dallas more broadly in Collin County specifically than we've ever seen before. So that's an important thing to note, because I think a lot of people are trying to spin a narrative in Dallas that the reason home prices have gone up so much is because migration has gone up so much. It doesn't really appear to be the case. And the other thing to remember is that Dallas and Collin County and areas, they just build so much too, right? Even if there is a surge in migration occurring, chances are there's a lot more building going on to take account of that migration as well. And this is often the thing that a lot of people who move from California forget. They move from California to Dallas and they think, oh, just because there was so much appreciation back home in California, I'm going to get the same in Texas. Wrong. The big difference between the two is that there's a lot of land. There's a lot of land to build around Dallas, and when there's so much land, that means there's a lot of supply, which tends to keep long-term growth low.
So I am coming to you now about 1 mile away from the street of homes in northern Frisco I just showed you. And what am I standing in front of, you might be asking. You're saying to yourself, I don't see much behind you. Well, that's the point. Here in northern Dallas-Frisco area, there is lots and lots of vacant land. Lots and lots of land that will be developed into new homes, new apartments over the next couple years. And this is the thing about Texas in general. This is the thing about Dallas and Frisco, is they love to build. There's lots of land, there's very lax zoning regulations, and they build more new homes and apartments than anywhere else in America. So if you are thinking of buying in Frisco, maybe buying a home that you see is appreciated already by 25% in the last year, or whose underlying rental rate has gone up by 35% in the last year, understand that that type of growth is not sustainable given what you see behind me. All this vacant land means lots and lots of new homes will be built very, very soon, and that means more supply, lower future appreciation, I think even potentially price decline.
And so when you have that much land, as you saw in that clip, and when you have lax zoning and building restrictions like Texas has more generally in Dallas, and especially those northern counties in Dallas have, you're just going to get a lot more housing supply built very fast to keep pace with the level of new demand moving there. And maybe there's been a lag so far in how that new building is catching up with the demand, but I'm telling you, they are putting it out there. There's been a 35% increase in the number of single-family home permits pulled across the Dallas metro. Most of those permits are coming in Collin and Denton County. So you can bet that, if you're buying a house or a property in these areas up north, and you're buying it based on the current appreciation, just understand that there's going to be a lot of competition, aka new supply, coming just down the road from you very, very shortly. But again, I would caution against thinking that buying in one county in particular is going to insulate you from a housing downturn, and that buying in one city in particular is going to give you way more growth. As we saw in that county level home price graph from earlier, these areas all throughout the metro tend to move pretty closely together. And if one area gets negatively impacted, it's likely going to spill over into another area. And that just gives me broader cause for concern for the Dallas housing market in general right now. Because the level of appreciation, the level of price growth we're seeing has never been experienced before in this market. I'm predicting that home prices in Dallas are going to trend back down towards the levels of inflation, and I think that means that there could be 20 or even 30% downside in home prices. Now, what does that mean? That means that if home prices went down starting tomorrow in Dallas and they went down by 30%, that would probably bring them back to like late 2018, early 2019 levels. So that's not really the end of the world for people who've owned in the market for more than a couple years, but could be problematic for those who are buying now, right? If you buy now, you could have this type of price downside. Now, this is just my opinion based on my reading of the data that come from Zillow and the U.S. Census Bureau and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. If you were to talk to a local Dallas realtor or local investor, I'm sure they would probably give you a more positive take on the future of the Dallas housing market. However, the thing I just keep coming back to is the data, right? I look at a lot of housing markets across America, both today and throughout history, and the thing that I keep going back to is two things really matter. The level of migration and jobs, number one, and the level of wages and inflation. And in Dallas, we are not seeing the growth in those fundamentals to justify the home price growth we're seeing, in my opinion. Like if inflation was raging over the last couple years in Dallas, and if we saw migration double over its previous levels, I'd be like, oh, okay, maybe this home price growth is justified. But migration levels are basically pretty similar to what they used to be. Home building is actually way above what it was even a year ago, and home prices are at their all-time highs relative to inflation across the Dallas metro. So I'm just not seeing any fundamental data point which is justifying the current state of the Dallas housing market, which leads me to believe we will see a crash and a correction. So I had a great time putting this video together. I spent about 3 or 4 days in Dallas. I met a lot of local realtors, met a lot of locals in general, had a really great time across the metro. And if you guys are enjoying these market deep dives, especially the ones where I go and film locally on site, as I did in Dallas this time and Oklahoma City last week, if you do enjoy that, think about becoming a channel member. The cost is $5 a month. You can hit the join button below, and you help finance these trips for me, because after all, they do cost money. I have to get Airbnbs and all that kind of stuff. So if you do enjoy the on-the-ground deep dive and you want to see me go to more markets, maybe your city eventually, think about becoming a channel member. You also get some cool exclusive perks, such as the ReVenture newsletter, which comes out once a month, as well as an exclusive community board that I post on a couple times a week. Additionally, make sure you're a subscriber if you haven't done that already. I come out with 3 of these data-driven videos per week covering real estate markets across the country, as well as the U.S. housing market more generally. And let me tell you, we have a lot of data coming in monthly now showing that the housing market in America has turned and we're entering a crash stage. So you're not going to want to miss this content going forward, so make sure you're subscribed as well. All right, everyone, until next time, this is Nick from ReVenture Consulting signing off.